The source material we are reviewing today is an analytical piece examining John Farnham's song, You're the Voice, exploring its themes of personal empowerment and collective civic action, alongside its complete lyrics. So, a key theme running through this material seems to be the broad concept of personal empowerment.
Right, yeah, that's definitely the big focus right out of the gate.
Yeah, but imagine admiring a beautifully built lighthouse. Like, you're admiring the smooth white paint, the elegant spiral staircase.
Mm-hmm. The bright light at the top.
Exactly, the brightness of the bulb. But you do all that without ever once looking down at the deadly, jagged rocks it was built to warn you about.
Oh, wow, that's a striking way to put it.
That is exactly what the author of today's piece has done. The current thematic analysis heavily emphasizes general personal empowerment, but overlooks the stark, specific anti-violence urgency, explicitly grounding the text.
That's clearly laid out. I wonder, though, if we've considered exactly how much of that existential threat the author has, left on the cutting room floor.
Well, what do you mean by that?
I mean, when we look at the submitted analysis, it eloquently frames the piece around overcoming despair. It beautifully outlines how a single voice can spark significant change.
Right, and how it acts as a beacon for people who feel isolated or unable to influence their surroundings. That is absolutely present.
It is, but the weakness here is that the submission completely ignores the literal life or death imagery placed front and center in the text.
Yeah, I see what you're going for here. Let's see how we can strengthen this. Because the draft speaks of empowerment in a somewhat, sanitized, abstract way.
Sanitize is a good word for it, yeah.
Honestly, it reads a bit like one of those motivational posters you might see in a corporate break room.
Oh, like the classic hang in there cat?
Exactly. The cat dangling from a branch or, a generic sunset with the word perseverance printed underneath in bold font.
Right.
Meanwhile, the actual lyrics we're analyzing are screaming, "We're all someone's daughter, we're all someone's son. How long can we look at each other down the barrel of a gun?"
Right, exactly. It's a massive oversight to discuss the social impact of the text without acknowledging that it is actively trying to stop people from shooting each other.
Yeah, it really is.
Is there a risk that focusing solely on the broad, feel-good aspects of empowerment might overlook the grim reality the song is reacting to? Because, universality only actually resonates when it's anchored in specific stakes.
That makes a lot of sense.
If you strip away the barrel of a gun, the empowerment becomes completely weightless. So the suggestion here is to anchor the abstract concepts of civic duty and personal empowerment to the literal, high-stakes conflict provided by the song's text.
Let me play devil's advocate for a second, though. Maybe the author intentionally zoomed out to focus on the universality of the song. Like, if you make the analysis too heavily focused on literal gun violence, do you risk alienating a reader who wants to apply this essay's thesis to, say, finding the courage to speak up against a toxic workplace culture, or organizing a local community drive?
That makes sense. But could the evidence also support a different conclusion? I would argue that making the stakes literal actually enhances the metaphorical application.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, when a reader sees that the song was designed to combat physical violence, they understand the true potency of the message. If the song's framework is strong enough to stand up to a literal gun barrel, then of course it's strong enough to help someone stand up in a boardroom.
Ah, right. It proves the strength of the concept.
Exact. But by removing the most extreme stakes from the analysis, the author inadvertently lowers the ceiling on just how powerful this anthem really is.
That's a great point. The stakes aren't just, I need to feel better about my place in the world. The stakes are literal survival. So how do we bring those jagged rocks into the foreground of the analysis?
Think about how that looks in practice for the next draft. Take the paragraph discussing the concept of fear.
Okay, yeah.
Right now, the analysis frames this fear as a sort of internal, social anxiety.
Like the fear of speaking out or feeling socially insignificant.
Precisely. Instead, the author should explicitly pull that barrel of a gun lyric right into the center of that paragraph. Illustrate for the reader that the fear the song combats isn't just the nervousness of raising your hand in a crowded room.
It's much darker than that.
It's the visceral threat of physical, existential violence. The empowerment they are analyzing is a direct countermeasure to mortality itself.
Wow, yeah.
And let's look closely at the section discussing shared human values, because that's another area where grounding the analysis in the literal text would work wonders.
Oh, totally. The author talks about solidarity, But they should connect that concept directly to the lyric, we're all someone's daughter, we're all someone's son. Like, show the reader exactly how the song attempts to disarm a violent conflict before it ever asks the listener to make a noise.
Building on that point, what if we looked at it from the perspective of the psychological work the text is doing? By forcing opposing sides to recognize each other's basic humanity and familial ties, the song strips away political or ideological labels. It's a de-escalation tactic.
Right.
If the author maps their existing thoughts on solidarity directly onto those specific, urgent lyrics, the entire analysis will immediately feel more consequential.
But wait, if we establish that the stakes are literal survival and there's a metaphorical or literal gun pointed at the crowd, doesn't that make the act of singing along or speaking out incredibly dangerous for the individual?
Yes, which brings us to a crucial missing piece in the narrative arc of this essay.
Okay, let's get into it.
The progression from individual empowerment to collective action feels somewhat inevitable in the current draft, missing an opportunity to explore the friction required to unite disparate voices.
Yeah, I noticed that too. The author notes how this source material moves smoothly from an individual realizing their voice matters directly to a crowd uniting around shared values to create real change. But does the current analysis make this transition sound almost too easy? It treats solidarity like simple math, you know? You just add one voice to another voice rather than a complex, terrifying social hurdle.
It really does. The weakness in this section of the analysis is that it treats collective action as a foregone conclusion.
Right, like it's just bound to happen.
The draft essentially says every individual has a voice, and when many voices join together, they create real change. It completely bypasses the inherent vulnerability, the terror, and the sheer risk required to be the very first person to break the silence.
Oh, that's a really powerful way to frame it.
Think about a completely quiet room where everyone is afraid for their lives. The person who yells first is making themselves a target. They are completely alone for that one agonizing second before anyone else joins in.
Yeah, that gap.
Exactly. The current draft ignores that crucial, terrifying gap between the I and the we. So the suggestion is to introduce the concept of friction and vulnerability into the analysis, focusing intensely on the sheer difficulty of initiating collective action.
I hear that, but let me push back again. Isn't the whole point of a pop anthem to make it feel easy?
Well, like the driving beat, the huge chorus, the bagpipes, it's all designed by Farnham and the writers to make you feel like joining in is the most natural, effortless thing in the world.
Sure.
So is it entirely fair to critique the author for analyzing the song exactly as it was designed to be consumed?
Musically, you are absolutely right. The sonic composition is designed to sweep you away. But analytically, if you just accept the music's trick without unpacking why it's a trick, you aren't really analyzing the text. You're just summarizing the vibe.
Exact. You're just summarizing the vibe. An analytical essay needs to look under the hood. The music makes it feel inevitable precisely because the reality of doing it in real life is so difficult.
That makes total sense.
If the author introduces the concept of friction and vulnerability into the analysis, focusing intensely on the sheer difficulty of initiating collective action, they elevate their essay from a basic summary to a profound psychological breakdown.
We want to see the author explore the mechanics of courage, rather than just the end result of it.
Exact. Look at the specific lyric, make a noise, and make it clear. Right now, the author analyzes this as a generic call to action.
Yeah, just sort of a general speak-up message.
Instead, they should analyze it as a risky, isolated moment. Show how this specific command acts as a fragile bridge between the solitary individual sitting in silence and the eventual public power where we all can stand together.
Right.
It is an imperative precisely because the natural human instinct, especially in the face of a gun barrel, is to stay quiet and stay alive.
And as I understand it from the notes, the argument here is that the text is doing the heavy lifting of convincing the listener to take that risk in real time.
Yes.
So what if the author reframed the repetition of the line, "We're not going to live with fear"? Right now, the essay treats that line as a statement of established fact. But what if they analyzed it as a difficult emotional hurdle the individual must actively overcome?
Love that interpretation. It's almost like a mantra someone has to repeat to themselves through gritted teeth just to work up the nerve to stand up.
Exactly. A psych-up moment.
If the analysis treats this line as an ongoing psychological battle rather than a neatly resolved conclusion, it suddenly injects a massive amount of narrative tension into the reading of the song.
Yeah, it becomes active.
You move from describing a simple mathematical addition of voices to describing a dangerous, highly volatile chemical reaction.
So we're talking about this massive gap between the solitary individual and the collective crowd, and the incredible courage it takes to bridge that gap. But what about the gap between the author's analysis and the actual evidence on the page? Because as a reader going through this document, I felt like I needed a bridge myself just to connect the ideas to this all.
That is a perfect transition, and it highlights a major flaw in how this document is presented.
Let's hear it.
The structural separation of the raw lyrics from the analytical commentary dilutes the emotional impact of the arguments being.
What we have here is a very robust, thoughtful analytical essay sitting at the top of the document, followed by a massive, standalone block of the song's lyrics pasted entirely at the very bottom.
Yep.
It creates a complete physical barrier between the theory and the evidence. Does quarantining the lyrics at the end of the document force the reader to do too much heavy lifting to connect the emotional words back to the analytical theory?
Is the connection between A and B fully established in the material, or is that an area to potentially bolster? Right now, the structure breaks the reader's immersion entirely.
Completely breaks it.
The fundamental weakness here is a misunderstanding of how a reader's working memory operates. The reader is absorbing all of these excellent points about empowerment, fear, and solidarity in a vacuum.
Right.
Then they finish the essay, scroll down to the next page, and are presented with 70 lines of poetry with zero immediate context.
By the time they get down to those lyrics, the analytical framing they just read is completely gone from their short-term memory.
Precisely. And furthermore, rendering the lyrics this way makes the repetition of the chorus at the end feel tedious to read rather than impactful.
Yeah, it's just block text.
In an audio format, repeating a chorus builds musical momentum. The drums get louder, the vocals get higher. But on a silent, flat piece of paper, reading the exact same 4 lines printed 5 times in a row just looks like a typographical error.
I'm going to challenge you on that, though. Doesn't chopping up the lyrics and scattering them throughout an academic essay destroy the poetry of the song?
Well, I understand that impulse completely. It feels like you're dismantling a pristine piece of art. But you have to remember the medium we are working in.
Which is?
This isn't a lyric booklet, it's an analytical essay. In an analytical piece, your primary job is to guide the reader's interpretation at every single step. If you just leave the lyrics intact at the bottom, you are abandoning your reader.
Yeah, you're leaving them stranded.
You're saying, here are my thoughts and here is the art. Figure out how they connect yourself. So the suggestion is to dismantle that standalone lyrical block entirely and weave the specific lyrical fragments directly into the analytical paragraphs as immediate active evidence.
It's like building a beautifully curated museum, meticulously designing all the lighting and the placards, and then just leaving all the actual paintings sitting in a giant pile out in the parking lot.
That is exactly what it is. You have to hang the art on the walls of your analysis. You want your text and the artist's text to be in a constant dynamic conversation.
Right, woven together.
By weaving the quotes in, you never let the reader stray from your guiding hand. You ensure that every time they encounter Farnham's words, they are seeing them exactly through the specific critical lens you have so carefully constructed.
So how do we actually do that? Like, concretely?
Well, instead of leaving the lyric, we have the chance to turn the pages over, we can write what we want to write, stranded at the very end of the document. The author should embed it directly into the essay's opening paragraph.
Ah, I see.
When they make the claim that individuals have the ability to take part in shaping reality, they need to drop that quote in right there to prove it.
Yes. Let the lyric act as the immediate punctuation to your analytical thought. And going back to what you said earlier about the repetitive chorus looking like a typo, what if the author used the repetitive chorus structurally within their own essay?
Oh, that's interesting. How would that work?
Instead of pasting the chorus 5 times at the bottom of the page, introduce pieces of the chorus progressively throughout your prose. As the analysis moves logically from the isolated, fearful individual in the first paragraph to the united, powerful collective in the final paragraph, introduce the chorus lines to visually mirror that growing momentum.
Wow, yeah.
You can have the text of your essay literally enact the thematic escalation you are describing. It transforms the repetition from a reading chore into a powerful rhetorical device.
That is a brilliant way to bridge the gap between the structure of the essay and the structure of the song. You're making the document itself mimic the chemical reaction of a crowd coming together.
Exactly. You want the reader to feel the momentum building in your paragraphs the exact same way they feel the momentum building when the drum track kicks in.
Yeah, that totally elevates the reading experience.
So, to synthesize all of this and recap our main points for the author as they head into their next draft. First, ground the abstract themes of general empowerment firmly in the stark, high-stakes anti-violence imagery of the text.
Right, bring in those high stakes.
Second, add analytical friction. Move away from treating collective action as an inevitable math equation and instead explore the deep vulnerability and inherent risk required to transition from a solitary, frightened voice to a massive collective movement.
The gap between the I and the we.
And finally, dismantle that standalone block of raw lyrics at the end of the document. Weave those quotes directly into your prose to strengthen the immediate impact and readability of your argument.
I genuinely love the foundational ideas in this piece. The understanding of human empathy and the desire to connect is already so strong here. I warmly invite the listener to implement these structural and thematic adjustments, play around with weaving those lyrics directly into your sentences, and submit the revised material back to the critique for another look. I am very excited to see where you take this next.